Hey there, my fellow author. I'm Sarah Elizabeth Sawyer, an old soul kind of writer living my dream as a full-time author and authorpreneur. But I didn't start out living a confident, creative lifestyle. I struggled with the fears and the mental and emotional barriers that so often plague writers at all stages of their author career. But the truth is that with the right knowledge, tools, and training, you can overcome those barriers. I'm here to teach you how I've developed a lifestyle that's allowed me to publish 19 books and counting. Each week, as you tune into the Confident Fiction Author podcast, you'll get clarity on the steps you need to take to advance your writing career. Whether it's developing your ideal writing routine, tackling new skills like dictating your fiction, or overcoming the obstacles life throws your way, this podcast will help you live a more confident, creative lifestyle. Let's get started. Hey there, my friend, and welcome to this week's episode of the Confident Fiction Author podcast. I am your host, Sarah Elizabeth Sawyer, and today we are talking about one of my personal favorite subjects, and it might be yours as well, and that is reading. As we all know, authors are readers, some more so than others. Some authors will consume hundreds of books a year, while others may only get in a few books each year because they're consumed by their own writing and other projects that they're working on. But in general, there have been very few authors that I've met that did not have a strong love for reading that goes back to childhood, oftentimes, and that's certainly where it started with me. I can still remember the very first book that I read. It was called Adam Raccoon and Forever Falls, and it was the first book I could read all the way through by myself. I knew all of the words, not just by sight reading. Well, maybe some of it was sight reading, but I could read it all. I remember visiting my papa in Fort Worth and reading the book out loud to him because I was just so proud of the fact that I could read. And I think I knew even then how much I loved it and would continue on for the rest of my life. Since then, my reading has grown and evolved to include fiction and nonfiction, and I consume books by audiobook, paperback, hardback, and ebooks. So for me, there's no right or wrong way to read. I just love to read lots of books every year. If you're curious, I usually read between 35 and 55 books a year, depending on the season of life I'm in and if I get a hold of a particular series that I just really love. That said, there is a particular time of year that I seem to get more reading in, and that's right around this time with the holidays. So with Christmas just a couple of days away, I thought it would be fun to just talk about reading because I'm guessing there's a high chance that books are on your Christmas wish list. That's probably what you'll be getting, at least from some people this Christmas, is a new book, or you'll be buying it for yourself and gifting yourself books for Christmas. And so if you're also like me, a lot of those books will end up on your nightstand in a teetering stack or beside your bed or crammed onto an already very full bookshelf or a very full e-reader and start teasing you with that sense of adventure and education and growth that you know are inside the pages. So as much as we authors love to read, finding time to consume all of the books that we want to in a year can be really challenging. And so I want to share with you a method that I came across this year that can increase your reading speed by up to 40% with just a single method. And I want to be clear, I'm not talking about speed reading. I've never done speed reading. I'm not talking about that method of having to cram in a lot of information or just grabbing the highlights from a page and tucking those into your memory, into your mind, and speeding your way, flipping the pages through a book. I'm talking about actually reading and enjoying the reading as you go along. So I'm going to share that method with you because, like I said, it's almost Christmas, and that's an opportunity that I like to take as I'm taking some extra time off to get in a lot of reading. It's usually the time that I get the most books in, And I also wanted to share, this is a really fun tradition that I heard about. I think it's an Icelandic tradition, and I haven't done a deep dive study on it, but it's basically the idea of exchanging books on Christmas Eve and then reading all night long. And I've never done that, but it sounds like a pretty sweet tradition. So that's something to think about. You get just this flood of books for Christmas, and it's complete with hot cocoa and hopefully a warm fire. So that, just keep that mental image in your mind as we talk about increasing your reading speed so that you can actually get that pile of to be read books whittled down over this holiday season. Let's get into it. Okay, so before I get into that method that you can use to increase your reading speed, let me just talk about why you would want to do that, because that may be something you're already feeling an objection to, that consuming books isn't about how fast that you can get through them. So you may be feeling like this isn't something you're even interested in learning how to do. Or you may have a vague sense that you want to read faster, but you're not quite sure why. There's always more books to read. Will you ever get to read all the books that you want to in your lifetime? And just having that general sense of not even sure why you would want to be able to read books a bit faster. So these are my reasons for using this method to speed up my reading. And that is, number one, getting through a book you're not particularly enjoying, but you want to finish for the information. I will be the first to say that I don't finish every book. I would say I finish 80 to 90% though. I'm not someone who likes to put a book down once I've gotten into it, but I have no qualms about doing that if it's just really bad, or I'm just really not enjoying it, or the author, if it's nonfiction, is just really going in a direction that I wasn't expecting and decide to not finish it. For the most part, I'm going to finish a book that I start. That said, it may be a book that I'm not particularly enjoying, whether that's fiction or nonfiction. So I have novels that come highly recommended to me, but I get into them and the author voice and style just isn't really jiving with me, or maybe there's a particular character that's just highly annoying. Maybe it's one of the main characters and I like the other characters, but this one is just really annoying me. And I want to finish the book, but I am not wanting to take a lot of time to do it. And so that's one reason why I will deploy this method to read that book faster and get on to the next book in my pile. Now, another reason you might want to use this method is it actually can give you better focus, comprehension, and retention. So if you are reading a writing craft book and you really want to take in the methods and the how-tos of the craft of writing, this is a great method to use in that book, because it can actually help you. Even though you're reading faster, you're focusing more on what you're actually reading and therefore comprehending and retaining it better because you are more focused on it. Versus if you're reading slower and your mind starts to kind of wander to your to-do list or to the novel that you wanted to read, this forces you to really focus and comprehend what it is that you're reading. The third reason you might want to use this method to read faster is what we talked about at the beginning, and that is reading more. So as authors, I know for myself, especially around this time of year, I like to read more fiction and really refill my creative well. And, going into the winter months, I just need a little extra sparkle and wonder in my life, maybe some more entertainment and just some more fiction in general. So I like to read more during this season, and whenever I'm using this method and able to read a little faster, I can read more novels. And I also read more craft books and business books with this method, and that's really a year-round thing. I am just always consuming things that will help me grow as a person and in my business and in my writing. So there are a lot of great books out there that are always getting recommended to me, and I put them in my Goodreads or on a note on my phone that is adding to my virtual pile of books to read. And so just bottom line, I want to read faster so that I can read more books that I'm wanting to read. The fourth reason that you may want to read faster is one of mine, and that's not reading as long, as in not as much time. So if I'm wanting to read a chapter or 5 chapters and it would take me, I don't know, a half an hour or an hour, I can cut that time down by up to 40% with this method. And so I'm still getting to read the amount that I want to read. So a chapter, 5 chapters, whatever it is, but it's not taking me as long. And that's better for my eye health. Whenever I'm reading physical books, I do need to be careful with how much time I'm staring at the page because I stare so much at my computer screen. So if I have an opportunity to read a physical book a bit faster, that helps me with my eye health in terms of getting that book read without as much strain on my eyes and my body in general from sitting and reading. That, of course, is not an issue with audiobooks, and that's one of the reasons why I listen to a lot of audiobooks. But honestly, I listen to my audiobooks at 1.5 speed as well. And I'm able to comprehend that. I had to build up to that speed, but I'm able to comprehend and focus on the content and what I'm consuming at that speed. That's with nonfiction. With fiction, I typically leave it at the regular speed because I like to hear the voice acting of the narrator. And if I have an audiobook that's just really well done, it's beautiful, I want to fully enjoy those voices and the character voices that are brought out by the narrator. And if it's a novel that I'm not particularly enjoying, I will go ahead and kick up that speed and go ahead and get the book finished. The final reason why you might want to read faster with this method is that you may feel guilty about reading time. You should not feel that, but I know I do. Sometimes when I'm just sitting and reading, my mind is going and telling me that I should be doing other things that are productive rather than reading a novel or even reading a business book. So I have that guilt that I have to tell myself this is a part of my career. It's a part of who I am. I just enjoy reading, and there's nothing wrong with taking time to do that, whether it's a part of my morning routine or spending an hour or two in the evening reading. I shouldn't feel guilty about it, but I will say that speeding up the process can help train your brain that reading is a good thing, and gradually the guilt lessens or disappears entirely. And this is something that I've experienced as I've gotten into reading faster, whether with audiobooks or with physical or ebooks, that sense of guilt that I'm reading really lessens because honestly, I'm so focused on the content that I'm reading, I don't have time or the energy to feel any kind of guilt emotion attached to that. Okay, so those are some of the reasons why you might want to use this method to read faster. So what is this method, Sarah, that you keep talking about of how I can increase my reading speed by up to 40%? So I want to start with saying that I got this method from Jim Kwik, Kwik. And I heard about it on a podcast and I went and looked up. He offers some training on development and brain development. And I've considered taking some of his courses. I haven't done it. It is a rehashing of a lot of information that's out there, but he has his own methodology that he uses and that he has put together that I think is really beneficial. I've used some things, especially what he teaches on memory and improving your memory. And so I've also used some of his methods in that, and it has helped me in being able to remember people's names and faces. So I just want to give him credit for teaching this method on his podcast and actually teaching it as a guest on another podcast that I was listening to. So this is the method to help you increase your speed, and it's super simple. But there are some things that I learned as I was doing it that will hopefully help make it easier for you if you decide to give it a try as well. So what the method is that is so super simple is using a finger to underline the word and sentence that you're currently reading. And yeah, if you're like me, you're like, that's what? And you may have already done this or experienced it to a degree. I know my mother, she used to like when reading lots of paperback books, and she does most of her reading online now. But whenever she would read books, she would use her bookmark to place it under the sentence that she was reading and then move the bookmark down the page. And that is similar to this, but it's a bit different. The reason why you use your finger is and go underneath the word and move across the page as you're reading each word is your eyes are trained to follow movement. So when we say we saw something out of the corner of our eye, that's because we're naturally wired to always be watching for danger. And so if there's any kind of movement, something that might be going to attack us or threaten us, our eyes are going to go to that. So when you're using your finger, that is movement. And so your eye is trained to follow that movement and therefore follow along those words in a very focused manner. So like I said, though, the idea isn't speed reading where you're moving your finger as fast as you can go. Just move it at the speed that you're reading and go a little faster if you can or if you want to. This is going to be up to you. You're not in a race. This isn't something that should cause you anxiety as you're reading faster. You just want to train your eyes to follow your finger and read the words and focus on the page. And having that action on the page will help you in following those words. And I know some, if you're reading, like say on your Kindle or if you're reading on an app, they will have where it highlights the words and it goes along, pow, pow, pow. And so it can help you read faster. So there are apps and programs for digital reading that you can take advantage of. But I'm specifically talking about, and you actually can use this with your e-reader as well. This is really helpful for paperback and hardback books, which I still love to read from those, that I'm able to get that sense and get that movement to be able to speed it up. So what you want to do with this is you want to time your reading speed so that you can see what this method does for you. So starting out, I want you to set your timer on your phone for 5 minutes. You can set it for 60 seconds, but I find that a little bit longer test helped me see where I was at in my reading speed. So I'm going to say 5 minutes. So set your timer on your phone for 5 minutes. Go ahead and put a mark where you're at and then set your timer for 5 minutes and start reading. When your timer goes off, stop and mark. I just used a pencil so that I could erase it out of the book that I was working on if I wanted to, but then mark that and then count the number of sentences that you read in that time frame. And what I did again in pencil, I just wrote down the number of sentences that I read in that 5 minutes. Okay. Then I want you to set the timer for another 5 minutes and start reading from that place. So not reading the same spot, but just keep reading forward. And I want you to use the finger method. So put your finger under the first word, start your timer, and begin reading. And follow your finger along the page as you're reading. When your timer goes off, mark it and count the number of sentences. Write that down and compare it to your reading speed when you weren't using your finger. Now, I found out 2 things with my test. One, whenever I was reading without using my finger, I was actually in a very dialogue-heavy area of the story, which I naturally tend to read a bit faster. So I took that into consideration versus the one where I was using my finger. It was longer blocks of text, thicker paragraphs, and so it felt like it was taking me longer like I wasn't making as much progress as I thought I might with this new method. When I counted it up, though, I was still at almost 40% faster using the finger method. That really surprised me because, like I said, the regular reading, I felt like I was going a little faster than I normally would when I was reading because it was a lot of dialogue versus those thicker paragraphs, but I still ended up reading almost 40% faster. And that's when I was convinced that while I may not use this method with every single book, paperback or hardback or even ebook that I'm reading, it was something that I wanted to keep doing. So that's kind of where Jim Kwik stops with sharing his method and kind of how to train and test out how it's working for you. But I want to take it a step further because I want to make this as effortless for you as possible. I want to let you know what the potential issues are, and so that you can avoid the things that I had to learn on my own as I was incorporating this into my reading life. So number 1, my finger rubbing across the page. So he said, don't actually put your finger on the page, but I found it kind of tricky to hover my finger above the page that I was reading. And as I was moving it along, and the page would kind of wave anyway if I didn't have it held open well with my other hand. And so I found my finger rubbing on the page, and that was irritating. It was kind of drying my finger out, and I just really didn't enjoy running my finger across the page like that. So what I did, and this is something he did recommend that you could use, it doesn't have to be your finger. You can use a pen. And so I was like, well, I can do that. That sounds, I have my pen with my morning pages notebook, and that's usually close to wherever the book is that I'm currently reading. So I decided to use my pen instead. It was a little easier to hover it above the page and moves along a little faster. Or if I wanted to put it on the page and run it across the page, not clicked open, but just running that to follow that movement across the sentences. The other issue I came across with that method, though, and this is another issue overall that I'm going to talk about, and that's lighting. So when I'm reading, I usually use neck lights or a headlamp. And so what I found with my neck lights, which if you're not familiar, go search for them on Amazon. I absolutely love mine. They just hang around my neck, and they're rubber, and I can position them and all this good stuff. So I really love my neck lights, but the lighting tends to come from underneath. And whenever I had my finger in position and running it across the sentence, I was blocking out my light. I was shadowing the page. And so what I decided to do is try it from the top of the sentence instead. Since the main idea is that you're just following the movement, it doesn't really matter, or at least I found it doesn't really matter whether you're on the top of the sentence or on the underside of it. It may be better being on the underside, and whenever I have just natural lighting and I'm not worrying about shadows, I do run it on the underneath. But I have found that I get really great results with running it at the top of the sentence, since, again, the main idea is that you're following the movement. So that's you're having the finger rubbing the page, using the pen, you're shadowing. Those are how you can overcome some of those things. The other thing is lighting. So I do use neck lights, or if I'm laying in bed, I have a headlamp that I like to use. And so it is a bit harder to do this reading method if you're actually laying down. If you're sitting up in bed, you can still do it just as if you were sitting in a chair, but it is a little more challenging in bed, I have found. So I just don't worry about doing this method and just enjoy whatever bit of reading time that I have in bed before going to sleep, because it's typically the last thing that I do before bedtime. But I just wanted to say, with all reading, we want to have adequate lighting so that we can see the page. It helps with eye strain, and you can get a headache from reading in poor lighting. So just wanted to encourage you to have lighting, and then find a way to position your finger or your pen so that you're not shadowing the page and you're still being able to take full advantage of the light. Oh, the other thing on using a pen versus your finger. So whenever I first started this method and I tried it, I had a hardback that I was reading through, and I tried this method on it, timed myself, all of that. And I was like, this is pretty cool. How does this work with ebooks? How does it work with reading on a digital device? So I had an ebook that was actually a book that was written by a friend of mine locally, and I had gotten the ebook and I wanted to read it. But it was one of those things that, I already have so many books that I need to read, and they're just getting lost in my Kindle. So I decided to test out reading her book with this method. And so I pulled it up on my phone, opened the app, and I started reading, and I was able to use my thumb across my phone and move it back and forth to read that book much faster. And I was surprised at how well that worked. The challenge with that, of course, is accidentally touching the device, because unlike a paper book, it is going to turn the page, or it's going to highlight something accidentally that you didn't want to do. But I was able to, for the most part, hover my thumb over, and that's how I read ebooks on my phone, with just using my thumb. With my iPad, though, if I'm sitting in my chair or something, I do go ahead and get my pen and use it just like I do with a paperback or hardback. I follow those sentences along with my pen, and that makes the reading faster on my iPad. So that's another benefit of using a pen versus your finger when you're reading on a digital device. Lastly, I want to talk about posture because this is something that he didn't cover that I think is just really important, because I'm always very aware of how can I actually read? Like, how do I physically read? If I'm sitting in my chair and I have my neck lights, or I'm reading by the lamp, like what kind of position do I need to be in so that I'm comfortable, my neck doesn't start hurting, my shoulders don't start hurting, and I don't create physical problems for myself while I'm doing lots of reading. So whenever I was adding this method, I was like, this isn't working very well in terms of posture because I'm kind of twisting myself around with my shoulder. I'm feeling some issues in my shoulder with holding it up with the book and following along the sentences with my pen. And I was just like, this isn't going to work. So I've got to figure this out. And so one of the things that helps me is I have a large throw pillow next to my chair, and I use that to prop the book up on, and that allows me to rest both of my hands, the hand that is holding open the book, and then the other hand that I'm using to hold the pen that I'm following my sentence, and it brings it up to just the right level that I like to have for my eyes anyway with reading. And so I'm able to just put my book and rest it on the pillow, rest my hands there, and I'm able to follow along with either my finger or typically the pen. You can also use the arm of your chair. So if you have a reading chair, like a recliner that you use, you can use the arm of the chair to rest your hands on. I think probably the most ideal way of using this method would be at a table. So say you are doing a study and maybe you have your laptop there as well, and you have a book laid out flat on a table and you're following right along with a pen or with your finger, and you're reading that content in a really focused manner, and you're also free to have a notebook or your computer to make notes on, again, if it's a study type of book. And so that can be an ideal setup. Also with the pillow support, I use this when I'm laying down. So it just, whatever I need to do to make sure that my shoulders and my arms and my wrist are not having any added strain to them while using this method. It's just like I teach with dictation, and that's the beauty of dictating, is it helps you with your posture and your eye health and just so many different things. But I always encourage authors to find a position that really works for them so that they can do their dictating in the most comfortable way that's just really healthy for their body. I wanted to be sure and cover those tips that I've developed with doing this reading method. All right, so to recap, this method that can increase your reading speed by 40% or even more. I'm still slow. A lot of readers experienced even higher results, up to 100% faster with their reading speed without actually speed reading. So that method, again, is using your finger or a pen to follow the sentence as you're reading and see how it improves, and then test that and see how it improves your reading speed, and then find a way that works really well for you to get comfortable and incorporate this method into your reading so that you can experience all of the benefits of faster reading. All right, that's all for this episode, my friend. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you have many happy hours of reading over this holiday season. Don't forget that you can go download the free Confident Fiction Author Toolkit that I put together for you over at fictioncourses.com/toolkit. It has some of my favorite books to read that will help you in developing that ideal creative writing life that you've dreamed of. Again, that's over at fictioncourses.com/toolkit. I want to wish you and yours a very Merry Christmas and happy reading. I will see you again next week for another episode of the Confident Fiction Author Podcast. Take care.